Now, second thing that I want to talk about was READMEs and instructions, and like kind of coming off of what we were just talking about sharing code with Git. To make a good site, program, software, whatever you're coding, it should be easy to share, collaborate, read, maintain, set up. All of this stuff are like the primary things in a good code base. Okay, so you have to really not think about just yourself, right? Obviously, the primary task is to get something working, fine. And if you know you'll forever just be working on it yourself, and you have this like cryptic way of doing things, like I guess that's fine. But even if it's only yourself working on the code base, if you don't want to make things hard to understand, even for your future self. So good code are all those things I just discussed, right? It's easy to read. You can see, it's like immediately obvious where files are. It's really quick to set up. Environments are abstracted so that even if it was just yourself and you went to work on your Windows machine or at work or on a different computer, and you only had this Git repository, it should be relatively painless to just pull this repository and get up and running. And so I saw some of that in your code base. It was very, and I think we talked about this last time too, it was very particular to your own machine, right? You had the hard-coded path to your site, which wouldn't have worked on anything else. So having said all that, a good entry point to this, whenever you set up a project, is to start with a README. Okay, I'm sure you've seen READMEs in projects before, code bases. Maybe you tried installing some software. There's always a README that tells you how to do things. Okay, so we should make our own. So let's put a README here, and it's written in Markdown. Are you familiar with Markdown?
No, I'm not sure.
No, it's pretty easy. Don't worry about it. So the second thing, even before we jump into this too, is I want to mention a good way of approaching a project that I really kind of came to like over time, is to start with your API first. So don't jump into your code and then you just kind of write functions and things kind of come together and then you document it after the fact. I like to do the reverse, and this leads to a really organized code base. So document in your README how you would want to use your project, how you would want to set it up, how you would want other people to use the code base, what functions and methods and objects are available to use in an ideal way, and then you code it out. As opposed to the reverse, where you just kind of like, okay, well, I have to get started somewhere. So you just start and then, and you write things on the fly. It gets very messy very fast. And you don't really have this kind of unifying, organized way of using your code. And that's what an API is. So you know the actual definition of an API? Not when I say API, I don't mean a RESTful JSON API, which it's a subset of that.
Well, I'm imagining some sort of user interface.
It's exactly it. You hit it on the nail on the head there. It's more or less analogous to user interface, but it's a programming interface. So just as a user is using some software and they have an interface to interact with the functions and how to do something with whatever they're using, programmers need the same thing, right? So it's an application programming interface. It's the same thing. How do you use your code, right? And it comes more into play when you have a public code base or like a library, right? Because now you have like all these public functions that you need to use in your code. So those functions need to be documented. This is how you use this function. This is what it does. But you should use that same mentality even in your own, if you have your own little private code base where it's like, maybe it's not a library, but you're still coding with it, and you'll maintain it over time. So you need to know what functions are available, what methods are available, what libraries are being used. All of that is like very good information, and having your own kind of interface of how to interact with your actual code base is like super key. So that's where I want to like start off this little discussion here is in the README and making a some sort of API that we can document in our README, and that will help us like get you on your way with refactoring your code, right? Because now you'll have a path to like, okay, well, you know, when Greg says, hey, clean up your code, well, what does that mean, clean up your code, right? Well, it means, you know, actually have some documented ways of using it. Like if you were to like hand this project off to somebody else, it should be clean enough that they can see the light right away and jump in right away and know how things will work and not have to actually read every little line of code before they knew how things would work, right? That was my case, for example. When I jumped into this project, it's like, and I don't expect you to have, you know, made this up front, so it's normal. But I had to basically read all your files and all your code to really know what was going on. But obviously, when you're working with a huge code base, you can't, you know, do that for every project, especially really big ones. You can't read through all the code. That would be insanity. So that's why you have these sort of APIs that are documented and available so that you can get coding right away. You kind of know what everything does and you can just jump in.
And would you have one for like every major feature or just one overall for a project?
So the README is the entry point to every project. Yes, have a README in every project. Doesn't always happen, especially in our private ones and all that. But this is the rules in our company, at least. And that's where we document the project.
So you don't have any sub READMEs for
you can, especially in a larger project.
Okay.
But in general, most of our projects are small enough. You can document everything in the README. But you can, like, if you wanted to put like, you know, okay, for example, so we have this assets folder here. I could put a README in this assets folder, and so when you actually go to this folder, you know, you see more instructions, and it's specific to this assets folder, and maybe it can explain how all the assets are handled. But in general, you just want to keep it clean and easy to maintain in one file here.
Okay.
And then, you know, just on that note, the reason why we do it this way too is that you also want to make your code clean enough that, you know, if you do go into subfolders and you start exploring the code, well, it's what's called self-documenting, where you don't need an explicit README to say like, this is how you use stuff. It should be written well enough that you know what the function or the method does, and there's maybe a little comment for any extra information you can't convey and how the code's written. You know, you're naming your variables very descriptively and not cryptically, right? Or you're not naming a variable A, you're naming it all usernames, right?
Right. Yeah, Jules.
So it kind of describes itself. That's how we code at Modo. Like it's always just one README, and then just write your code well enough that, you know, you come in through the README, but then if you have to dive in, well, it's not, you could figure it out pretty easily. So, okay. So, can maybe just, this is README now. This is a markdown now. So, it's really just a way of writing, it's a superset of HTML. So you can write HTML directly in here. Okay.
Okay.
So you can write, this project called Jules' School. This is perfectly valid Markdown, but the whole point of Markdown is to let you write HTML really fast. It's simple HTML, right? So instead of doing that, you can do that. Okay. So a hash sign and pound sign. One of them is an H1, two of them is an H2. You make lists like this. Right, that's the same as doing this.
Oh, okay.
Or here. You get it. There's a really fast way of writing HTML. So and you can just Google Markdown. You'll get a cheat sheet or something like that, and it'll give you the. It's very, very fast to learn. It's pretty intuitive. So Jules is cool, and then let's see what kind of sections we want. We always want to set up instruction, okay, and then maybe we'll want one for local, and then maybe one for production, and maybe we have something for deployment. These are the usual ones for most of our READMEs in-house. We have a setup, we have a deployment, and then we have like some specific notes. But always set up and deployment, because that's every project. You're going to need to set it up locally. You're going to need to be able to deploy it. In our case, we're not really deploying anywhere yet, so we won't have this. I'm just giving you an idea. And then you can go into like how to use your application. So then like maybe usage, right? Usage is how you're going to use the code. And you can do maybe your assets. Okay, so here's one, right? How are we compiling our assets? I noticed that in your project, and we can actually get right into this after, because I noticed you weren't able to set up Tailwind quite fully. We need a command. At the very least, we should have a command in here of like, okay, this is what you run to compile your files. Ideally, we have it baked into our package, since you are using Tailwind it's installed here. I'm going to actually remove this because I don't want you messing around with too many packages. It can get confusing. But I'll show you how to do it otherwise.
Okay.
So we'll start with this. So let's. So actually, you tell me, how did you initially compile this output.css here?
That happened by itself. I think it's the Tailwind install that does it when you start the index file.
I'm not sure how you installed this project or anything like that. So
oh, right,
okay.
it's with the through the terminal.
Okay.
So
I'm going to go to Tailwind here. And
yeah, it was just their normal install. Yeah, there we go. Yeah,
okay.
that's right.
So you do the init.
Right.
Okay. Okay. So. Okay, that's fine. We'll roll with this. And then I guess you ran something like this.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's see if I can run that myself and see if it works. Oh, there's one problem. Because your asset's here, right?
Yeah, that file name has to be changed.
Right.
But that was the line I ran.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm just using this as an example now, because like now, just as we went over it, like now that's proprietary knowledge, right? So that's something only you know in your head.
Oh, okay.
And I would have to figure this out to get the project running. So this is a perfect example of what to document, right? So so I don't want people to have to guess at this. Once you get it working, it is it's assets, styles. Oh, sorry, CSS. CSS. And let's first get it working. I cannot find. Okay, so we have this forms in our config. Okay, so that means we're going to have to also install forms. So that's probably because you might have installed this on your local machine, but this node modules didn't get properly versioned or something like that. And that's exactly why we don't version node modules, right? Because we want to just be able to run npm install, and then you have the configuration for all the packages in here. So this file is important to version, as is this, but not this, because at any moment we can always just run npm install and we can download these packages here, right? So we'll actually make a little note here to set up. You're gonna have to do npm install. Backticks are just for code code formatting. So I'll try to rerun this. Okay, so that's working. Great. Let's just try. All of my paragraphs I want to be read. That should compile, and everything's read. Okay, so now we know our tailwind's working, right?
Yeah.
So let's document this. And there's two, right? So there's one is watching for development, right? So you get kind of like, you know, maybe you're coding a lot and you're making a lot of changes and you just want to keep refreshing everything and see the progress. That's one case where you're in active development. And then there's another case where you're preparing it for production, and maybe you want to minify everything and you want to do a few extras for performance. So we have two different, I'll just get rid of this. We have two different things to document. We have files with this. And then in our deployment section, we're going to make a note that we want to run something slightly different. So before deployment, run this in, that's what it's called.
And what does that do differently?
That will, hang on a second. I don't know if you remember what the file looked like before, but if we go to this now, no, that didn't work. Optimizing for production. Okay, so we can pass this minify.
Oh, okay. So it makes it that line where it's like the
It'll
one
crunch
line.
Yeah, right. And we see right now. So we just saved like quite a few bytes doing that. And yeah, there's other things we could probably do, but we'll keep it simple for now. So this is the command we want for deployment. All right, well, we'll just change this. And so, okay, so that's our tailwind. That's one thing down. And your forms should be fixed now, actually. I noticed they were kind of collapsed here. Yeah. So now they have that formatting.